Welcome to the Golden Pathway Zoom seminar. I'm Patricia Parham, and we are into sharing the teachings of the Ascended Masters and helping seekers connect whatever path they are on to the teachings of the Ascended Masters. We have done workshops over the last 5 or 6 years on a variety of different topics, ranging from relationships to prosperity to how to work on your psychology. And this year, our theme is climbing the mystical path. And today we're going to have a presentation by David Brewer on the secret Bible teachings on the sons of God. So the Bible contains the Word of God, the teachings of Jesus, and keys to help us live a masterful life. It also contains many fascinating facts. For example, how often does the Bible use the phrase sons of God? Who are the 4 sons of God mentioned in the Bible who are not named Jesus? Learn how many sons there will eventually be on the earth. In addition, we will identify the events prophesied that, when revealed, will change the earth forever. Our study of the Bible will reveal references to the only begotten Son of God, and we will review the 3 literary devices in the Bible that signal secret teaching that is about to happen. Finally, we will uncover the secret power Jesus possessed, but which is rarely discussed. And this is all based on the research of David Brewer, who's been a keeper of the flame for over 50 years and on staff at the Summit Lighthouse since 2012. He served on the Prosperity Development Team, and he is currently a mentor for new keepers of the flame. He grew up in a Methodist family. At an early age, he loved Bible stories, but wasn't much interested in the church and the Bible itself. And that all changed as he heard Elizabeth Clare Prophet talk about the Bible. So he now enjoys being a Bible detective. He loves uncovering the deeper truths of the Ascended Masters' teachings that were in the Bible all along. We are so happy to have you with us, David. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Let me know when I'm supposed to start,
and now would be a good time. You're on. Here's David.
So we're going to investigate together secret Bible teachings on the sons of God. And we're going to start. I want to introduce my parents, because if it were not for them, I would not be sitting here with with you and with all the other light bearers in the world. So my mother's name was Anne. My father's name was David. There they are in their younger days, and they're both passed on now. And I wanted to start with a prayer that my mother was a teacher, both in high school, and she also taught a Sunday school class in the Methodist Church of women her age. And so she always began her classes with this prayer, and I want to use this prayer in her honor. I did ask the angels to bring my parents here somewhere where they could participate and see this according to God's holy will. So this is the prayer from Psalm 19. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Amen. So we ask Christ to overshadow this class, and let's continue on. I wanted to introduce someone. I'm part of a team of private spiritual investigators, and I wanted to introduce one or two because one of them will be seen in some of the pictures here. And he's somewhat of an intriguing character. He's a private spiritual investigator as well. This is Agent K-18 of the Celestial Secret Service. He's on loan to us at this point. And he has the ability to travel back in time. He also has the ability to travel in other dimensions. And you may see him pictured in certain historical events as we begin investigating the Bible. He is an investigator of many talents, and he has a friend that he brought with him, his partner. This is another member of the Celestial Secret Service. He's on loan to us as well. He is Agent K-19. And he's been a partner for K-18 for many decades as Earth time is measured. He's already been of service to our larger team, a burgeoning team of private spiritual investigators, PSIs, as is the abbreviation of that. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about the Son of God and the sons of God. So we're going to be asking several questions, and here they are. Is there one and only one Son of God, or are there more than one sons of God? Are there more? If there are more than one, how many might there be? And you will be very surprised, I believe, at what the Bible says about that. If there are many, how does one join that club, the club of the sons and daughters of God? If there is a club of sorts, then is there a roadmap to get there? Is there a process for joining? Are there guidelines to follow? And we won't get as far as answering questions 4 and 5 today, because we'll only get about maybe 40% of the way through the material that I have. But we will see what the evidence indicates, and we'll see if there's other possibilities besides only one Son of God, or more than one sons of God. So we'll head on now. Here's the evidence of the only begotten Son of God. Now, you may have attended sports events on television or in person or other big public events, and occasionally when you do, you see individuals holding up a sign, right? A sign, and quite often they have Bible verses on it. Here's one sign that I've seen a number of times. And this says John 3:16. John 3:16 is a verse which our more orthodox brethren in Christianity tend to hang the hat of their belief. And here's what it says. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. And that's a great promise of God in John 3:16. There's 4 other places in the Bible, for a total of 5, where the Bible uses the phrase, the only begotten Son of God. And I'll show you them. I won't read through them all because time is a concern. But I do want to look at the first one at the top, which says, and the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. Now, if you look at the word among, which is I put in quotes up there on purpose, it's not in quotes in the Bible, but that among is a translation of the Greek word en. But it has other ways that it can be translated, and I wanted to show you a couple of them. And they're right there, maybe small print if you can see it. One way that that word in Greek that has been translated among can also be translated as in or inside. So one of the things we do as spiritual investigators is we sometimes use definition substitution. So I'm going to read that first part of that, John 1:14 up there, and substitute in and inside for among. And the Word was made flesh and dwelt in us. And the Word was made flesh and dwelt inside of us. And we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. Imagine that if the Word made flesh dwelt in us. Is that possible? Well, we'll see what you think as time goes on. So we go to the next one. There's the other 2. And I'm kind of doing the prosecution's job because we're in the court of public opinion, as we all know, because everybody in the public, including all of us, have opinions, right? So we're in that court, and I'm doing the prosecutor's job right now, prosecuting the belief that there is only one Son of God, and therefore we should, call to him to save our souls and so forth. I'm sure we've all done that. I've done it many times. And so there's 5 verses. Now, here's the interesting thing. The only begotten is talked about in 5 verses in the Bible. All 5 verses are in 2 books, the book of John and John 1, which is the first epistle or letter of John. And those 5 verses in 2 books are all from one author. Okay, so kind of bear that in mind and we'll move on. I'm going to put on my defense attorney's hat here. So I think there are some things lacking in the prosecutor's evidence. For one, it ignores three facts that present themselves in the same two books by the same one author. Same author, same two books. So I'm wondering if the prosecutor failed to disclose exculpatory evidence, is what they call it, I believe. John the author presents a different perspective to the one and only begotten Son, upon which much of Christianity has based their belief. In three different verses in the same two books, John refers to sons of God, the plural. So we're going to take a deeper dive into those three verses to start off with. And before we do that, though, I do want to say something about power, specifically the power of God, or God power, or the power of Christ, Christ's power. And here's something Jesus said. And Jesus said this right at the point when he was empowering the disciples to go out and do as he had done. He couldn't do and go to all the places he wanted to reach and affect the lives of all the people he wanted to affect. So he empowered his disciples. But right before he did that, he said this: all power is given unto me in heaven and on earth. Now I was kind of wondering, how much is all power? Is it, just a little bit of power? Kind of a moderate amount of power? Is it 10%, 15%, 50%? All power seems to be the key word there. All the power in heaven and on earth. Heaven's a big place and earth is too. So I wondered if that power that he was given, all power, included the power to give that power to anyone he chooses. Well, let's see what he says about that. He does, John again enumerates a power, and I wanted to use a Phillips translation of the New Testament because this was my mother's favorite translation, and she used it in her Sunday school teaching. And so here's John 1:12 in the Phillips translation. Yet whenever men did accept him, meaning Christ, he gave them power to become sons of God. How about that? He had the power to give us the power to become sons of God. And here it is in the King James, with a little more that comes before that particular verse. He came to his own, meaning Christ came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. Yet to all who received him, he gave power to become sons of God, to those who believed in his name. So as I looked at that, and it's kind of up there in its distilled form, to as many as receive Christ at the top of the screen, he gave power to become sons of God. So I wondered what received means. So one of the things that the private spiritual investigators that I belong to as a group do is we use word and definition substitution. So we looked up the word receive in the Merriam's Collegiate Dictionary, 10th edition, and there's a number of meanings for that. To come into possession of, acquire, to act as a receptacle or a container for, to assimilate through the mind and the senses, to permit, to enter, to admit. So what we can do is to get a little better understanding of what this means to be, to receive Christ. It means to, as many as came into the possession of Christ, he gave power to become sons of God. To as many as acquired Christ, he gave power to become sons of God. To as many as acted as a receptacle or a container for Christ, he gave power to become sons of God. To as many as assimilated Christ, he gave powers to become sons of God. So I kind of think you might be getting the picture there, that using definition substitution or word substitution can give an additional meaning and a depth, because as we know, good scriptures all over around the world, Buddhist, Hindu, Christian, Jewish, are written on many levels, like up to 40 levels of meaning. So it's very fun to, at least for me, to dig deeper. So basically, to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Notice the difference, to become children of God. So a lot of Bibles will say, use the word children, where other versions say sons of God, some use children. So what can we do with this? Because it helps us all to know, because you may quote one of those verses I just quoted you, and somebody say, well, wait a minute. In my New International Version, it says, become children of God. What say you, Mr. Brewer, Mr. Private Spiritual Investigator? And I would say to them, I said, well, let me ask you, I have children. Do you have children? And many of us do. Some don't, maybe. But the point is, what do all children do if something tragic doesn't happen before? All children grow up. Is that correct? All children grow up to be sons and daughters of their parents. They're no longer called children at a certain point. This is my son, so and so. This is my daughter. I have a daughter that lives, and Karen has 3 children. They're all grown. They have families of their own. So children are expected to grow up. And here it is again. And you notice that over off the hill on the left side of that picture on the left, you see that K-18 is kind of sneaking around over there. So again, remember this, to as many as received him, meaning Christ, to them he gave power to become sons of God. Anybody interested in becoming the son of God? There's 2 other places in the same 2 books. That's the first verse that is by John in those 2 books that refers to sons of God. Here's another one that refers to sons of God. Behold, what manner of love the Father hath bestowed upon us, that we should be called sons of God. Therefore the world knoweth us not, because it knew him not. Which suggests to me, this is in his epistle, that as he was writing this letter, they were being called sons of God at that time, 2,000 plus years ago. And there's one last verse, and I love this one because it's very mystical. This is the 3rd verse from the 2 books and the 1 author. And it says, beloved, now are we the sons of God, and it doth not yet appear what we shall be, but we know that when he shall appear, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. And we could talk about that, but we don't really have time, but I just love that. We shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. So it makes me wonder how he is that we will be like him when he does appear. Maybe he's already here within us. So here's the summary of evidence. We have the one and only on the left side, 5 verses, 2 books, 1 author. And on the right side, we have more than one son of God, 3 verses, 2 books, 1 author. We're still in the same 2 books, same author. I notice that our more Orthodox brethren don't quote those very much. I wanted to give you the summary of evidence if we had a whole lot more time than we have. And I could bring you all the verses, all the books, and all the authors that refer to sons of God, or the possibility of many sons of God. And to date, it's 44 verses in 18 books, and 12 authors. So let's weigh this out. You got 5 verses, 2 books, 1 author. You have 44 verses, 18 books, 12 authors. Which way does the evidence seem to point, I ask? But let's move on. So there's 4 individuals in the Bible who are called the Son of God, but they are not named Jesus. Let's take a look at those. Oh, wait a minute. Here we have a picture of Adam and Eve in the garden. And if you remember the book of Luke, you know, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Luke 3 tends to trace the lineage of Jesus because Jesus is called the son of David. So Luke was trying to prove that Jesus was in fact the son of David by going all the way back through the lineage of Jesus to, well, if you look down there halfway down where it says, you see a 38 there, verse 38, who was the son of Enosh, who was the son of Seth, who was the son of Adam, who was the Son of God. Oh my goodness, there's another son of God with a name. Kind of fun, isn't it? Well, let's think about this. If Adam was the son of God, wouldn't that make Eve the daughter of God in a full but different manifestation of sonship and daughtership in God? Well, methinks so. So let us move on, because all creation, think about it, the creation all around us, everything in the universe is waiting for something really big to happen. The question is, what is it that the creation is waiting to have happen? Paul says it's this. He says, I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. The creation waits in eager expectation for the sons of God to be revealed. Amen, Brother Paul. That's Romans 8, verse 18 and 19. If all creation is waiting for the sons of God to be revealed, does the Bible tell us how many sons there will eventually be? Are you ready to have your minds stretched a little bit? When I first read this many years ago, I thought, what in the world? I couldn't believe what I was reading. So let's go. This comes from a prophecy of Hosea. Hosea was one of the first of the 12 minor prophets, and he lived in the 8th century before Christ. And here's what Hosea says in Hosea 1:10. The number of the children of Israel shall be as the sands of the sea, which cannot be measured or numbered. And it shall come to pass that in that place where it was once said unto them, you are not my people, it shall be said unto them, you are sons of the living God. Now this is a pretty deep verse. I'm just going to mention a couple of things. You notice the children in the first line become sons and daughters or sons of the living God in the last line. That means they went through some kind of an evolutionary process, right? What happened to them in between? Well, they must have got to a point where God said to them, hey, look, you are not my people. You people are disobedient. You're a thick-necked generation. I'm not going to talk to you anymore. But so there's an evolution there. And I think it's a reincarnational revolution, but that's another story. So let's do something interesting with this. This is another Dave Star, Dave, Detective Dave technique. And that is to put the last part, the sons of God, first, and the first part last. So when we do that, we come up with this. The number of the sons of the living God shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered. So I want us to do a quick little meditation. So in this meditation, I want you to begin. It's not going to be one of these woo-woo meditations. It's just going to be really simple. Think of a beach that you've been on before that you really liked. It might be in California, it might be in the southern part of the United States, eastern part, it might be in another country. Okay, I want you to see yourself laying out on a beach towel or in a beach chair on that beach. You're hearing the waves rolling in. It's a beautiful sound. You're relaxing. And you're going to reach down with your right hand and grab a handful of sand. And then I want you to, in your own mind, don't need to say it out loud, but just in your own mind, in that handful of sand, put a figure in your mind of how many grains of sand you think are in your hand. Don't have to try and count them. Okay, doesn't so much matter what you think. You could have thought 100, you could have thought 1,000, you could have thought 10,000 or 100,000. Now I'm going to ask you to imagine how many grains of sand. You know, the tube of light is 9 feet in diameter, and you're sitting there on the beach that you love, and you're in your tube of light. So imagine how many are in that 9-foot diameter tube of light around you where you're sitting on the beach. And you probably can't even guesstimate what that might be. Okay, now look as far as you can to the right and as far as you can to the left on your favorite beach. How much more sand do you see? How many grains of sand might be there? Oh, wait a minute. The tide is going out. What do you see? More sand. Oh my Lord. More sand. And then that's just one beach. How many beaches are there in the world? So that's a lot of sand, right? Okay. So that suggests to me that the number of the sons of God that will eventually be would not fit inside the nation of Israel, nor in the nation of the United States. So the Israel talked about there may not be the nation we know today as Israel. But anyway, we need to move on, but I just wanted to see if we couldn't stretch things to their limits of human thinking. There's 3 different biblical devices that when seen or read or heard signal to us that we are about to receive a secret teaching. And they're pretty simple. Anytime Jesus is teaching us using a parable, that is a secret teaching. But the bells go off. For example, we know this because the disciples and the holy women who were also disciples came to Jesus once and they said unto him, well, why do you always teach the masses of people in parables? And Jesus said unto them, unto you it is given to know the mystery of the kingdom of heaven, but unto them that are without, all these things are done in parables. So in the parable, he cloaks a secret teaching or a divine or a more intense teaching in a story, because people love stories. And if he can plant the seed with the parable and the story in their hearts and in their souls, that seed is intended to grow as the children of God grow into sons and daughters of God. So you may remember the parable of the prodigal son. If you remember this story, a son goes to his father who's very wealthy, and he's a young man, and he's been promised an inheritance. He wants to get it now and go out and make his way in the world. So his father agrees to that. He goes out, and within a few years, he spent all of his money. He's in rags. He's hungry. He's in terrible shape, and he starts thinking about home that he left. And he realizes that even the servants of his father lived better than he was living at that time, had food anytime that they were hungry. They had nice clothes, even if they were servants' clothes. They were taken care of, treated properly. And he said, I will go back home. I will ask to become a servant in my father's house. And so he did. And he rose and he came to his father, but while he was still a long ways off, his father saw him coming up the drive a long ways away and felt compassion and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to the servants, bring quickly the robe, put it on him, put a ring on his hand, shoes on his feet, bring the fatted calf, kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is now found. Let us celebrate. And I think if we are honest with each other, we might see that prodigal son in ourselves. I certainly do. So there's another one, and we're talking about 3 devices that signal you're about to hear a secret teaching. And this is any time when usually it's Jesus saying it, but he's saying, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. And he's doing this while he's already talking to people. So it kind of seems unusual that he would use a statement like that. So down below there's a parable, another parable about the good seed that fell on the good soil and so forth. I won't go into that, but here's a little bit of it, right from Luke 8:8. And some of the good seed fell on good soil and grew and yielded 100-fold. And Jesus said, as he said these things, he called out, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. So he's telling those who have a little more attunement that I've just given you a teaching. Did you hear it? And the next one is when the Bible says, he who overcometh, he who overcometh. And I'll show you one of those in the book of Revelation. There's 6 or 7 or so verses or areas of Revelation that start off, he who overcometh. And I'm just going to show you one of them, but every single one of them says, he who overcometh will be given a white stone, be given a new name. You may remember some of these, but here's what he also says, he that overcometh shall inherit all things. There's that all word again. I just love the word all when God's saying, here's the possibility for you. You can inherit all things. He that overcometh shall inherit all things. I will be his God, and he shall be my son. Now, I'll skip over this a little bit later for time's sake, but in the red letter editions of the Bible, this is not in red letters, meaning this is a statement of God. And so it's a statement of God, not to Jesus, because he's already overcome. He's relaying this vision of the revelation to John the Beloved, who's in embodiment. He's up here ascended. So he's not speaking to God. Who might he be speaking to? Any ideas? Me. So there's a artist's rendition of John the Beloved. So let's think about another word for overcometh or overcomes, which is what the one who shall inherit all things does in order to inherit all those things. He overcomes. How about the word masters? Let us use word substitution again to gain perspective and depth of meaning. He that masters shall inherit all things. I will be his God, and he shall be my son. So let's look at the next one here. This is something Jesus said. These things I have spoken unto you, that in, got too many things in the way here. That he believeth on me, the works that I do shall he do also, and greater works than these shall I do. There's the promise. Anybody want to do greater works? And I would guess this was time for a discussion another time, that you are already doing greater works than Jesus in some ways, but that's another story for another day. But while we're at it, let's see, God's talking about sons of God, but does the Bible talk about daughters of God? Well, I'm going to move you folks out of the way again here for a minute. This comes from Isaiah. And this, of course, Isaiah is a prophet. God speaks through prophets and speaks through them in the first person. God is saying through Isaiah, I am with thee. I will bring thy seed from the east and gather thee from the west. I will say to the north, give up, and to the south, keep not back. Bring my sons from afar and my daughters from the ends of the earth. And I put before you that God is trying to do that right at this very point in time and space. That's just my opinion, and I welcome people to have other opinions. And this is from the Old Testament or the Jewish scriptures from which the Old Testament is taken. What about the New Testament? 2 Corinthians, again, Paul says, you are the temple of the living God. And hang on, I'm gonna be able to see this. I will dwell in them. I will walk in them. As God has said, I will dwell in them. I will walk in them. I will be their God. They shall be my people. Wherefore come out from among them and be you separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you. I will be a father unto you, and you shall be my sons and daughters, saith the Lord Almighty. So yes, sons and daughters. So we want to go back into what 4 individuals in the Bible were called Son of God, but were not named Jesus. We talked about Adam, Son of God, Eve, the daughter of God. You may remember the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I used to think that was to bed you go when I was a kid. And so they were young Jewish boys or young men. And King Nebuchadnezzar, who was a very big despot, wanted everybody in the kingdom to worship him and his idols that use his religion. whatever that might have been. And they said, no, don't think so. We have our own. And so he decided that he was going to punish them and he was going to throw them into a furnace of fire. So he had a furnace available and he had some big burly soldiers build it up till the fire in that furnace was 7 times what it was designed to withstand. And then he had these burly soldiers throw the 3 young men into the furnace. The furnace was so hot that the young men putting him in there all died. They all just burned up. And so King Nebuchadnezzar, of course, was presuming that the 3 men were at least burned up, since the soldiers who didn't even go into the furnace were burned up. And he looked and he said, now he talked to his advisors and say, did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? Because he bound up them so they couldn't move. And then Nebuchadnezzar says, lo, I see 4 men loose walking in the midst of the fire, and they have not been hurt. And the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Now, this is the Son of God before Jesus, the advent of Jesus. This is in Daniel chapter 3. And we may know the story of what the Ascended Masters teach us, who these people were then and who they are now. But that's another story for another day. We don't want to go too far, right? Okay, what about this character? Another biblical character. Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like unto the Son of God. Here's another Son of God named in the Bible. Now, of course, this is the Christed one that Abraham, coming back from the wars that he was in against the Nephilim, tithe or gave 10% of his what he won in the wars to Melchizedek as a tithe. Tithe means 10% or 1/10. But there's another one. We'll dwell on this just a little bit longer. So this is from Exodus, and this is when Moses went back into Egypt. We won't tell the whole story of Moses, but it's a very fascinating story. He went back into Egypt because God told him to. And he started telling Pharaoh that the Pharaoh should let the children of Israel go so that they could be free. They'd been enslaved for 400 years. 400 years is almost twice as long as the United States has even been in existence. 400 years enslaved. And God sent him to Pharaoh, say, let my people go. And the Pharaoh kept refusing. And so he would make the invocations and all of these plagues descended upon the Egyptians. And so say unto Pharaoh, thus saith the Lord, Israel is my son, even my firstborn. And I say unto thee, let my son go, that he may serve me. And if thou refuse to let him go, behold, I will slay thy son, even thy firstborn. And that's what the Lord God said through Moses and Aaron to the Pharaoh of Egypt, because all the other plagues had not worked very well, hadn't changed the Pharaoh's mind. He thought they were just kind of magic tricks. And there's another one here, which is when Israel was my son, I loved him and called my son out of Egypt. So if the son of the Lord, the firstborn son of the Lord, he is Israel, that means that he is the Israelites, the people of Israel enslaved in Egypt. And there may have been other places. But so there have been people that have suggested that there was 1 million to 2 million Israelites that came out of Egypt. So I was going to put on my little tally 1 million people over on the sons of God in the plural, but I thought that might be a little much, so I didn't do that. But I was tempted. Maybe someday I will. So in the book of wisdom, wisdom is a book that's in certain Bibles and not in others. It's in the Catholic Bibles. And this is what it says in Wisdom 18:13. These people, the Egyptians, had paid no attention to any warning from Moses and Aaron, but relied instead on their magical powers, which they did have. But when their firstborn sons were killed, then they recognized that Israel was God's son. So there's another, I won't say individual, but there's another person or people named the Son of God. Now, there's one more biblical individual called the Son of God that is not named Jesus. And I went through this before. This is from the Red, Blue, Green Bible. And you notice that the second sentence there, he that overcometh shall inherit all things. I will be his God, and he shall be my son, is in lighter blue, because in the Red, Blue, Green Bible, that's in blue ink, because the blue ink is a statement of God. We won't go into that, but Red, Blue, Green Bible is basically the King James translation, but it carries the red letter concept farther. It's very interesting. Now, there's 4 Bible era individuals that are some way greater than Jesus. Well, how can anyone be greater than Jesus? We've already gone through Melchizedek, King of Salem, which is at the end of the first paragraph, means King of Peace. So let's compare here. Let's weigh things again in the scale. You've got on one side, Prince of Peace, Jesus, right? Called the Prince of Peace. And Melchizedek, called the King of Peace. So which is greater, king or prince? I don't know. I'm just saying. I'm curious. I'm asking questions. That's what a private spiritual investigator does. So, but let's listen to some of these other descriptions of Melchizedek. He had without father, without mother. Jesus had both of those. So however he got there, it was pretty interesting. Without descent, meaning he doesn't have any lineage after him, no children. Having neither beginning of days, so he was always here, nor end of life, he's always going to be here. Now, Jesus did have a beginning of days. That's why we celebrate December 25th as his birthday. And Jesus does not have end of life because he ascended and he's eternally alive in God, but made like a son of God abideth the priest continually. So there's several ways there that Melchizedek is different. Now, what about this character, John the Baptist? Let's listen to what Jesus himself said in Matthew 11:11. These are Jesus's words. Verily, meaning truthfully, verily I say unto you, among them that are born of wisdom, women, excuse me, let me start again. Verily I say unto you, among them that are born of women, there has not risen a greater than John the Baptist. Now, wait a minute. Wasn't Jesus born of woman? Well, of course he was. We just talked about celebrating his birth. So Jesus is saying that of all those ever born of wisdom, of women, of wisdom, because women are wise, of course, born of women, there has not risen a greater than John the Baptist. Notwithstanding, he that is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. So John the Baptist was this great person in God, and yet there's people in the kingdom of heaven that are greater than he. And he, at least in this one way, is greater than Jesus because Jesus says he is and was. So, you know, we just have to ask ourselves, do we believe in Jesus or not? Do we believe what Jesus says or not? So one more, maybe there's one more. This is Moses. Jesus on one occasion fed 5,000 people, one meal. That's a pretty good trick when you start with a couple loaves of bread and a few fish, and you multiply it to feed 5,000. On another occasion, he fed another group of people, 4,000 people, with a few fish and a few loaves of bread. So there's 2 meals. But Moses, calling to the intercession of God, and God fed the children of Israel for 40 years on manna. till they came to the land inhabited. They did eat manna until they came unto the borders of the land of Canaan. So 2 meals versus 40 years of meals. I'm just saying. Now, Jesus also walked on water, right? He walked on water toward the boat where his disciples were. And Peter was in the boat. Peter says, Lord, bid me come unto you. Jesus says, come. And he gets out of the boat and starts walking towards Jesus on the water. But then he looks down, he sees the waves kind of rocking around, and all of a sudden he gets hit with fear, starts to sink. Jesus extends his hand, grabs him, and lifts him up with his own light. So that's good. We love that. It's a miracle. He walked on water. 2 people walked on water. Moses walked up to the sea, parted the sea, and 1 million or more Israelites walked across the sea, not on muddy land, but it says on dry land. Now that's a pretty good cosmic trick, methinks. So at least he in some way was greater than Jesus. So we're just kind of having fun here. There's one more individual who's prophesied to be greater in some way than Jesus and become the son or daughter of God. That individual is, wait for it, it is you. This is your mission possible. Should you decide to accept it, you can, in my opinion, become the son of God, the daughter of God. This tape will self-destruct in 15 seconds. The defense rests for now, almost. So remember, John 14:12. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that believeth on me, the works that I do shall he do also, and greater works than these shall he do, because I go unto my Father. So here's again our final tally. If we were to give you another hour or so of I'm trying to look at the time here, but which we can't do because it's not on this PowerPoint, but there's much more than what we've gone through here today. But it's still a question of the only begotten Son, if that's what God in his intent is for us to know and believe. 5 verses, 2 books, 1 author. Or does God want us to understand that there are more than one Son of God, many sons of God perhaps, in which the Bible offers 44 verses, 18 books, 12 authors. So back to our questions that we looked at in the beginning. Is there one and only one, or are there more than one? If there are more than one, how many might there be? We went into that. As many as the grains of the sands of the sea. Let's just call it a bunch, potentially. And then what does the evidence indicate? We've gone through the evidence. We really didn't have time to go into 4 and 5. If there are many, how does one join the club? But the Bible does actually lay out some very specific things. For example, in some versions of the Bible, in the Sermon on the Mount, when Jesus is giving the Beatitudes, and blessed are thee, and blessed is this, and he says in some versions of the Bible, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. So there's one instruction. If you become a peacemaker, and we always have to start with peace within ourselves. If we can't be peaceful ourselves, we can't go around and tell somebody else that they should be peaceful. Hey, look, you're angry, you should be peaceful. Oh, but I'm angry at you. Oh, well, that's anyway. So you kind of get that idea. But we can go into that perhaps another time if I don't get thrown completely out of the golden pathway after this presentation. So the Bible suggests there is one and only one Son of God, but the Bible also indicates there are more than one. Question is, does the Bible really suggest that both statements are true? And that's not in this, but I believe that's what God is actually trying to say. And this is true, there's only one Son of God. And this is true, there's many sons of God. There's only one Christ, but there's many Christed ones. The way Elizabeth Clare Prophet has put this, you may remember the mathematical principle, 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 is still 1. So as the Christ multiplies himself over and over and over again, the one Christ, guess what? You come out with many Christed one, many sons of God. And it may not seem possible, but what we do know, because Jesus says in the Bible, with men, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. So there you go.
Thank you, Detective David. It's been a joy to get to know Detective David, Bible Detective David. This is really great information. Anybody have comments or questions for David at this point?
I just like to say thank you, David. I think this was so powerful, just beautiful.
Oh, thank you, Sharon. How are you doing?
I'm great. Great to be here.
We just had a conversation the other day, so it was a fun.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Elementals. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. Rosalinda has a hand up.
Thank you, David. That was so interesting and wonderful. I've always wondered about this, especially a lot lately, maybe for more than a couple years. When Jesus was talking to the Pharisees, when he was walking the earth, there was talk of him being Son of Man. You
Right.
know, he got in trouble for being saying he was Son of God, but it seemed like the Son of Man had a lot of implications too. Do you understand the differences and why that was such a they considered a blasphemy when he said that?
Well, I think they considered everything he said a blasphemy, but so my understanding, and this is partially from what Mrs. Prophet has said, that Son of Man means the son of manifestation, son of manifest action. So he was when he said Son of Man, he was physically a man who was the son of another man, right? He began as a child and he grew up. He went to Egypt as a young man, and then he went to India, we know, but the Bible doesn't agree with that or doesn't say that. But anyway, so I think that's talking more about the outer man, son of manifestation, but in the same sense that he's the son of God in the manifestation of a man. That's the way I look at it. And then the Son of God, of course, is he became the Christ. And I remember that Mrs. Prophet said that at the moment when Jesus experienced the transfiguration, you may remember that Peter, James, and John, other disciples, and Jesus went up into a high place, and Jesus went off a ways and began to pray, and Peter, James, and John were observing him. So here he is, he's in whatever clothes he was wearing that day, and they're looking at him, and all of a sudden what they see, this is the way I look at it, what they see is him in his Christ self. They don't even see the human anymore, the human clothes, the human man. They see the Christ because his garment became white and glistering. Also appearing, or two other ascended masters in one or more of the accounts in the Bible, which is Moses and Elijah, appeared with him in, I'm using quote marks here, in glory with him. So they were in their ascended state, in glory with him. And here's the three of them talking, and he's completely transfigured. But the point I wanted to make about what Mrs. Prophet said about this particular moment in time, as I recall, was that when Jesus was transfigured, that's the point in time when he became permanently bonded to his holy Christ self. In other words, he was the Christ, he had access to the Christ was walking around, his Christ self was walking around in him, as was his Father, his I am presence, and we know his teacher was Maitreya as well. And so I think when Jesus said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. So I think he was the I am presence, the Christ self, and the Son of Man, the physical manifestation, all right there in front of us when he was walking around teaching and performing his miracles. And she also said, as I recall, that we know that in the average person walking down the street, the average soul created by God, that the threefold flame is 1/16 of an inch high, right? 1/16 of an inch is about the size of a mustard seed, very small. But Mrs. Prophet said that Jesus, at the point of his transfiguration, his threefold flame was larger than his physical body. So when he was on, you might remember when he was on the boat with the disciples and he was asleep. And the storm comes up and the disciples, the boat's being tossed all over, and he's still asleep. He's a very peaceful guy. He's asleep. And they say, Master, Master, we perish. And he wakes up and he just says, stands up and commands the waves and the wind. And he says, peace, be still. And what were they going to do with a threefold flame larger than his physical form? They were going to obey. These were nature spirits, you know, they create these things because they're out picturing turbulent human karma at times. And so he just commanded them to be still, and the wind went away, the sea calmed down, and everything was good. So it's a remarkable story, and we had to see, this is the way I look at this. We had to see, and now read 2,000 years later, what it was like and what it meant to be fully the Christ, not on our way to Christ, not partially, but fully the Christ. We had to see it outside of ourselves. We had to see somebody who had all of these abilities, all these skills, all these talents, all these powers, who is including the power of teaching, the power of comforting, the power of resurrecting his own physical body. We had to see that in order for us to be able to understand what our own pathway was and who we really can be and are in the process of becoming. So Jesus never said that he was the only Son of God. He never said it. So, and I think if it would have been true, he would have said it, but he didn't say it. So I don't think it's true if he didn't say it. I'm not going to believe it, because there's so much more evidence that he was really here to teach us how to become that Christ. And we sometimes in our teachings that we follow, it's called the path of personal Christhood, because every person can become the Christ, and there's a process for doing it. And that's what our messengers, Mark and Elizabeth Clare Prophet, came here to teach. Teach David Brewer, teach Patricia, teach Rosalinda, teach all of us how to become the Christ. It's totally unique, totally individual when we do, because we're all total individuals. That's why Jesus was totally different than John the Baptist, totally different than Moses, totally different than Buddha, totally different than Confucius, Mother Mary, and Kuan Yin, and all these great living examples who are still living, great examples of Christhood in action.
Thank you, David. That was a good answer to a long answer to a short question. Good question,
Yeah.
Rosalinda. Thank you.
Thank you very
Richard,
much.
Richard, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, so when it says when God created the only begotten Son of God, he individualized himself. He put himself in form, the level of the Christ, and created the only begotten Son of God. But at that level, the Son of God is one. And so all the sons of God are really one with the Christ. There's one
Right.
Christ. So when we become our Christ self, it's not like we're all running around with individual Christ selves. You know, we look at the chart of the presence and we look at the figure in the middle, and it looks like Jesus. And some might say, "Oh, is that Jesus up there? Is it Jesus, or is it your Christ self?" And it's intended to represent your Christ self. But the answer to the question, those two questions, is yes in both cases. It's Jesus. It's our Christ self, because our Christ self is one with the Christ self of Jesus. So we are
Right.
sons with Jesus, the Son of God. So it circled back, in a sense, there is one Son of God, but we are all part of that one Son of God, individualized. And that's the great mystery and the incredible magic of it all, that we are one at the level of the Son, one with the Father, one with the Christ.
Well, I think you put your verbal finger on it. It's a mystery. Sometimes mysteries, we sort of get them. We understand that they are a mystery, but they're really hard to explain sometimes. I mean, I thought you did a good job in trying to explain that. And I hope I was doing somewhat of a decent job in trying to explain the different, Son of Man and all of that. But another thing, I mentioned the feeding of 5,000 one time, 4,000 another. Let's consider this just real quickly for a minute, because I think we have to get going maybe. But so what did Jesus do? He took 2 loaves of bread and 3 or 4 fish. He multiplied them. He sent his disciples out with baskets full of food to feed these 4,000 people one time, 5,000 another time. And then in both cases, when he was done, when they were done, they'd eaten their fill, he sent the disciples back out with baskets again to collect what was left over. How much was left over was more than he started with. They brought back 12 baskets full of leftovers, and he only started with a couple of loaves of bread and a couple of fish. So there was more left over than there was when he began. And this is the Christ consciousness, that part of the one way to look at, for me anyway, the Christ consciousness is when a person like Jesus becomes the Christ, he breaks the bread of life. He said, I am the bread of life. He breaks that into pieces. He gives you a piece, you a piece, you a piece, you a piece, me a piece. Gives Ping a piece. It just showed up. And gives each of us a piece. And then he expects that piece to be, he talks about leaven, talks about all of these things related to bread. He expects us to become, so to speak, the whole loaf. Because then what can we do? We can take and break the bread of life that we are becoming and are part of, and give it to other people. And so in giving the people the bread of life that God has given to us and broken for us, we can give that to them, and then they have that seed within themselves. So that's another way to look at it.
Thank you, David. Thanks for that comment, Richard. Ping, you have your hand up?
Yes.
Ping, you might have to.
You just muted yourself again. You
Yeah.
unmuted, then you muted.
Take your mute off.
I don't want to talk a lot because my English is not good. So I just want to ask the question in the text comment below.
Okay, do you want me to read the comment in the chat?
Yeah.
Did the only begotten Son of God ever incarnate in this world? I have questions about the only Son of God. Did he ever incarnate in this world? That's Ping's question.
Well, I think that's why many of us were raised Christian who lived in the Western world, because that's what happened in the case of Jesus. Jesus was a man, the Son of manifestation, who became the Son of God, the only begotten Son of God, full of grace and truth, as the Bible says. And then those two merged, the Son of Man, the Son of God, rose up into the presence of God above and became one with God. But he can still separate himself out. And I think there have been many people before him. Melchizedek was an example. We have people in other religions that did, because in other religions, they use different words, different descriptions, different languages. They're in different cultures, but they're really talking about the same God, and they have their own ways to get there. And those are valid ways. Buddha made his ascension. Confucius made his ascension. Krishna made his. Kuan Yin made hers. And many men and women have made their ascension over many centuries and eons of time here, including Enoch in the Bible, Elijah in the Bible, and John the Baptist, who was Elijah in his previous life. And so, yes, I think there are many that have become that only begotten. And that was the point of some of these discussions we've had, which is that each individual can become the only begotten Son of God. And that isn't impossible to do, because as I say on the screen right here, with men, this may seem impossible, but with God, all things are possible. It's a mystery, meaning that it's a little hard to figure out, and you're not going to get there. We aren't going to get there with our logical mind. It's almost something we have to slide into, and all of a sudden, oh yeah, I get it, or at least I'm beginning to get it. And then eventually we won't just get it, we will become it. That's the purpose of, I think, why we're all walking towards God.
Thanks,
Right.
David. Ping also comments, he says, Jesus is the incarnation of the Word. Jesus is the incarnation of the universal Christ.
Right.
And are the Lamb and the only begotten Son of God the same?
I would say for all practical purposes of understanding, I would say yes. One way that I look at the Lamb is I look at the word and I see L-A-M-B. Light or love is the L, or law. That's the three aspects of God. Light is wisdom, love is love, and law is the power ray, pink, yellow, and blue. The light I am becoming, that's the way. And so the Lamb is considered, I think, to be the Christ self, and Jesus was the Christ self incarnate. So I would say yes on that. I forgot the
yes.
good part of that.
Yes. Thanks, David. Yes, Ping, Jesus is the Christ. Sharon, last comment.
Thank you. David, I'm just so amazed at your expertise here. And the one thing I wanted to say was, I think in today's world, it's so important that we have this understanding that we can do things, as Jesus said, your works will be greater than mine. So this was a good reminder to me that, we do have that power in our lives. So thank you again.
Oh, you're very welcome. And thank you all for attending. Appreciate it.
Thank you, David. I want to say to newer people online who may not be here, when you were talking about Jesus said that John the Baptist was greater than he, might remember that Elijah was John the Baptist was a reincarnation of Elijah, and Elijah was Jesus's teacher when he was Elisha. So that may have some bearing on that as well.
I think it completely bears on it.
So thank you. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, Elijah would be another candidate for being greater in some way than Jesus, because he ascended before Jesus. He came back to be the forerunner for Jesus.
I have a question.
So wait. We're gonna cut off now, Ping. If you could, we are going to, our time is kind of up.
Okay, it's fine.
And be rest assured that, David, you are not being barred from the golden pathway, and we will definitely invite you back for part 2, because we got more questions and you've got more information to share with us. We're all very excited to hear that. And yes, thank you so much. And I'd like to invite you all to our session next month, which will be on May 19th with Carol Brenner. And she is going to teach us how to slay the dweller, our own dweller, with lessons from The Taming of the Shrew by Shakespeare. So if you're ready to slay your dweller, come back next month on May 19th, and Carol will lead us through that. So please express your appreciation to David. We are truly grateful for your presence here and all you shared with us today, David.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, David.
I applaud you all.
Thank you, David.
You're welcome.
Thank you.